Thank you to the International Economic Forum of the Americas and the Conference of Montreal for having us here in this amazing panel talking about bringing the power of Silicon Valley to Miami. And here with us, Bill Harris, a superpower from Silicon Valley. So, hi, Bill, welcome.
Hello, how are you all?
So, Bill has an impressive track record. In fact, he's over the last 30 years, he has run and founded more than 10 companies. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, my journey, gosh.
A little bit, because we're
a little bit. Okay, great. Until 40, I did what my parents thought I should.
Yeah.
You know, good school, good companies, raise up the ranks, and I found myself the CEO of a public company with 5,000 employees. Pretty quickly realized I was no good at that. And so left, and since that time I've been starting little companies, which is where I think I'm good. But let me just tell you, my career has been a progression of understanding what I am not good at. And that's not false humility. That is, I think, essential to effectiveness. Understanding what you're not good at, because we all want to be good at everything. Mm-hmm. Understanding what you're not good at is the more painful part than understanding what you are good at.
And we talked a little bit about that, of all the different mistakes that you made along your journey. Do you want to share some of those mistakes and give some advice to entrepreneurs that are starting their journey or that are scaling their companies on what not to do?
Sure. So along the lines of knowing what you're not good at. What I am not good at is managing. I'm not a good manager. I wish I was. To some extent, it's my job. But I'm not good. I don't have the discipline to, make the trains run on time. I've got, I think, great creativity, and I love ideas, and I've got enthusiasm coming out my ears. But discipline, I did not get that gene. And so what does it mean for me to be successful and potentially for other people to be successful? It has taken a long time. It has been very painful to understand the point at which in an organization, I'm not the right person to lead it any longer. Mm-hmm. And I think I now understand that. I think I now understand that I'm good for the early stages in the first couple of years where we're trying to work out the formula and figure out what works and how we're going to build the business. But then once that is figured out and it's scale and execution, I need to have somebody else come in and do that.
Correct.
And so with other founders, be ready to give up your baby if it's the right thing.
Okay.
At the right time.
Correct. And so you consider yourself good at ideation. All these ideas are coming through your brain. And from your experience, what is essentially needed to take an idea from an idea to a concept to actually an execution and implementing it into a real company? And maybe you can take us through, how did you take the idea of Nirvana technology all the way to implementation, which you're currently doing now?
I've got a unique opportunity in my life because of doing so many different things and moving, starting one thing and seeing usually success, sometimes not, and then starting the next one. So my path has allowed me to flare and focus, which is one of the things they talk about in design school. Flare and focus. The one is, and it sort of really relates to the two most important words for me, curiosity and purpose. And for the curiosity portion, you get to sort of look everywhere and think about everything and come up with 1,000 ideas, and they're all marvelous. They're all marvelously interesting. They're not necessarily marvelously good. And so what I have had the opportunity to do is allow myself the breadth and then gradually work, because I have these opportunities where I'm out of the last thing and into the new, and then gradually work down to something much more specific. What do you need in order to do that? You need people who are going to work with you and make sure that they help you understand where the gold is. Be someone like me, all of the ideas are fascinating, and I'd love to do them all. And so having first of all, advisors or people just and work with early on, but then secondly, the very early employees and the very early board members who can help you focus, crucial.
Yeah, and it's very important also to make sure you have product market fit, right? You have great ideas, you think you can conquer the world, but then you go out into the world and suddenly there's no market for it. So it's very important to make sure you have that.
That's true.
So
And by the way, that's another thing I'm not good at.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm not, because there's a whole science of customer research and planning and all the rest of that. And it makes sense, particularly in situations where you're going to make change, but it will be somewhat evolutionary. I prefer the revolutionary change. The revolutionary change, it's difficult to query the customer and see but what ends up happening is you take bigger risks, and it's more likely that you just won't hit the market fit.
No, very true. So you recently moved to Miami.
Yes.
From Silicon Valley, and you're establishing Nirvana here in our city. Can you tell us why you decided to move to Miami and establish your company here? And tell us a little bit about the company and what you envision for the next 5 years for it.
Sure. Why? Sunshine.
The big question.
Sunshine. I'm quite serious. Sunshine. I moved here for personal reasons. And Silicon Valley is great, a marvelous place to live, but it is getting to be a more difficult place to live. And the quality of life here in Miami is spectacular. And I just love it. That's why I moved, for personal reasons. Having done that, I found a metropolitan area that is very receptive to building a technology community.
That's very true.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on right now in Miami. Many founders moving to Miami and growing their businesses here. So we're very fortunate to have you here. Tell us what you envision for the company for the next couple of years.
Well, if we're really talking about the broad scale, I'm hoping that 10 years from now, we are one of the representative pure play consumer finance companies that is defining how finance should be done in a digital age. And so that means a pretty broad scope, all within consumer finance. What are we doing right now? We're trying to do a credit card, a better credit card. And so the notion is, if you look in the past 5 or 10 years, one of the big themes has been moving from bank to neobank. Over the next 5 or 10 years, our thesis is that one of the big things will be moving from card to neocard. In other words, let's rethink the whole issue of doing revolving personal unsecured credit, but do it in a way that is simpler and encompasses more functionality, ultimately makes it easier for people to manage their money.
Okay, very interesting product that you're developing. And when it comes to products, how does it mean to compete with large established institutions like banks, for example?
Well, I love it. And the reason I love it is that through no fault of their own, large organizations have difficulty with change. The successful large organizations are often very good at doing what they've always done, but have real difficulty doing something new. And the best of them can do that. It just takes time for a whole series of reasons. But the notion of competing with behemoths, it's actually something thrilling to me. And I remember an early venture capitalist meeting. I think it was Personal Capital that I was raising money for. And we were sitting in the room, and the potential investors said, okay, we understand what the business is. Who's your competition? And I said, well, Fidelity and Vanguard and Schwab and Goldman and Morgan. And they said, how in the world do you expect to compete? And I said, exactly. That is an unfair competitive advantage. We have nothing. And in a world of rapidly accelerating change, if you know what to do with it, having nothing is a tremendous advantage.
It's a great opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Disrupt certain industries and come up with innovations that we haven't seen. So I am very happy to see that you're on that track. And you've also expressed that you're hiring between 100 and 200 people locally here in Miami in the next couple of years. Can you tell us how that process has been to source talent, ideal talent locally? Can you share some of that experience with us?
Sure. Difficult to find, even though there's a lot of activity that's starting to happen here in Miami, difficult to find people who are who have experience in Silicon Valley style businesses, hyper growth, hugely scalable, and on modern technology platforms and things like that. And so what we've attempted to do is import many of the senior people and then build the local staff with that experience having been imported in. And so far, we're about a third remote, a third imported, and a third local. And we anticipate that it will become more and more locally sourced talent as we go forward.
Great, and that's very important because by bringing that senior talent from Silicon Valley, you're also helping to train and local talent, right? So they can grow into senior positions with your company and maybe in the future some other startups from Miami.
Yes, and it's a matter of getting talent and experience, but it's also culture. And one of the things that, sort of one of the little indicators of that is when people talk about their job, if they're an engineer, do they say, I'm in IT? We don't say IT, we say tech. And what's the difference? Well, in many ways, nothing. But there's a fundamental cultural difference. And so often, IT is part of an organization and it supports the organization. With tech, tech is the organization. That's the whole thing.
Makes sense completely. And, fintech companies are having a hype right now. There's experiencing hyper growth in different markets. What factors do you think contribute to this growth and what opportunities have you noticed for, predominating the fintech industry within?
Well, if you look at those industries that are going to be foundationally changed or even have been foundationally changed by computing and connectivity, I would say media and finance. And why? Well, if you're buying something in e-commerce, you can order it electronically. They still need little brown trucks to deliver it to your door. If you're doing media or finance, the entire transaction, both directions, can be handled electronically. And in fact, when you do that, it is better, cheaper, faster. And so if you look at media has already gone through this transition. Old media, I used to work in the media, magazines and newspapers and all the rest. It's crumbled. And all the digital media has flourished. In the financial sector, that has not yet happened. And what you see today, even with the successful fintechs, it's just the early days and the early flowering.
There's so much innovation right now in the fintech space. We're seeing a lot of companies coming out of Latin America and the United States, so it's an exciting time. But share a little bit about what you think is happening regarding cybersecurity within those industries too, because you have a lot of experience in cybersecurity.
I've started 3 different cybersecurity companies, some hardware-based, most software-based. And in fact, it's one of the reasons that I came to Miami that I forgot to mention. I'm also chairman of a company that I helped start that's out by the airport that does identity management and access control for the federal government. And so it's all about authentication. Why did I get into authentication? Simply because as you start to do financial transactions remotely, sometimes the most difficult piece is understanding that the instruction you're receiving is legitimate. And so authentication, of course, is the way to handle that. There was a period of time where consumer authentication was just a big mess. All we had was passwords. Passwords are very insecure for a number of reasons. At PayPal, when we started out, PayPal was the first company that would allow you to electronically in real time skitter money across the globe from you're home.
Anyway.
And we were hit with, I mean, some of the very earliest phishing and all sorts of very ingenious attacks. It was a horrible minefield for a long time. Now, it's still a difficult thing. But the fundamental difference is that we now all have phones in our pockets. And effectively what those phones are is they are authentication machines and biometric readers, whether it's face or touch or even voice. So now we can do true multi-factor authentication using the equipment that they always have on their person.
No, that's fascinating. And from everything that you're seeing that is coming out regarding the fintech space, there's so many payment solutions and other different sorts of businesses. Which ones are the ones that are going to really be able to survive? Because there's a lot of them coming out. What do you think is the secret for them to be successful?
Differentiation. Our watchwords are new, different, and better. I mean, your startup, you're new. Different. If you're not different, don't try. Because as a tiny little organization competing with the big guys, they have every advantage. They have customers, money, reputation, etc. Don't try. You will fail. So you need something that is fundamentally different. And then secondly, of course, it has to be better, because difference, if it's not better, doesn't count. So what are the organizations that are most likely to succeed? The ones who are really thinking differently. And I'll tell you one other thing about my observations of what's called the neobank space. Doing absolutely the right thing in terms of channel, all digital channels. Doing some very good UI work, at least in comparison with what most of the traditional banks do, and some wicked smart marketing. I mean, they're revving up millions of customers with using internet marketing techniques as opposed to the way banks have traditionally marketed. What they forgot, in most cases, is the product. Because if you look at the financial products that are being offered by most fintechs, they're essentially the same products that traditional banks have been offering for decades. A checking account and a debit card and a whatever.
And a credit card.
And a credit card, right. Well, I better do my credit card differently, shouldn't I? So a different slant on things, something that will be fundamentally better for the customer. That's what's required. Because copycats pretty much get lost in the dust. Yeah,
and I'm seeing so many founders and dedicating years into products, technology, making sure that it's good before they invest all the money into marketing and sales. Because I think if you go too fast into marketing and sales and you don't have a good product, then you're doomed to fail.
Yeah. And that's where we've got an advantage, because one of the things that's big in Silicon Valley is, and I'm sure you guys have heard of it, is MVP, minimum viable product. Because you need to take the money you've got to rapidly iterate, you've got to get something out, throw it out the door, see if you get any traction. Why? Because you don't have much money and you've got to have something to show when you go back for more money. And so this whole notion of minimum viable product, I mean, I think it's a disgusting phrase. The minimum viable product, is that really what you want to do? I think it's wrong, except in the context of, hey, I've got to get something out there in order to get the money. We're lucky because we're self-funded, so we can afford to try to build right now the technical foundation. That will be our legacy for the next 10 years.
And you have the trajectory and experience, so now you won't make the same mistakes as before.
Oh, believe me, I probably will.
So sometimes founders have difficulty in identifying and knowing when to step down from their leadership positions and hire top managers to take the company and scale it to the next level. What advice do you give entrepreneurs that find themselves in that position?
The most important part, I mean, you could say, well, listen to other people, listen to your management, listen particularly to your board. I mean, the board, this is not usually as practiced, but in theory, what the board should be doing is not managing. They often, in this young company, they often sort of get involved in managing and making decisions. That's not productive. Their job is governance. So yes, they should be the ones who are helping you understand that it's time for you to step down or step up or step aside or whatever it is. However, the most important piece is just yourself. You have to work really hard to understand, honest to God, what are you good at, what are you not, and then be able to let it go. And that's a really hard thing to do for something that you've invested your energies in and your enthusiasm and brought the people together and it's your idea. Really hard to let go, but you have to learn how to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure. You have to cut the umbilical cord at some point and let your company or your baby grow. So
that's right. And of course, there are plenty of examples of founders who have gone on to greatness at very high scale. I'm just not one of them.
Okay. Well, thank you for being very honest and humble with us today. We're almost running out of time, but I have one last question. What advice would you give or tips to entrepreneurs who are thinking to moving to Miami and actually building their company in Miami like you are?
I'd connect with the support system here in Miami. You are a part of that. The mayor's offices are a part of that. So many of the entrepreneurs that are already here are part of that. And, I can't help but mention as another example of real success in this way, Montreal. I happen to work with Power Corporation in one of our previous companies, and so I'm familiar with what they're doing at the huge level, at the growth stage level, at the early VC level. And they're doing so much in Montreal that they're building a community. They already have built a community. It's a remarkable tech hub. And so having people or groups that are there to help facilitate and build all of this is vital. And I see that here in Miami as well.
Yeah, it's very important. Miami has an amazing ecosystem for entrepreneurs. There's so many organizations that are working together to build Miami as a tech hub. And I think it's very exciting to have you and Nirvana Technology as part of that ecosystem. So I can't wait to see where you take your company and the next steps next years.
And by the way, I probably would be in Montreal if they had sunshine.
Okay, you've heard it. Miami, sunshine, and we're welcoming entrepreneurs from all over parts of the world to establish their companies here. We're very excited to have you, Bill, here, and thank you to the Conference of Montreal for having us.